Okay, now the last thing I want to show, maybe the last thing, we'll see, is right now we're loading from a file in app.js. Sorry, one quick note. So that was also a style thing. So note this file is called app.js, but I've been calling things .jsx. It doesn't matter. You can use either .js or .jsx. I just personally like JSX to remind myself I'm writing React code, not regular JS code. But feel free not to do that. This will find it no matter what you call it. So the last thing I want to do is not call this results file, but I want to actually load data from an API. So let's do that. So far on every component that we've declared, we've only filled out one function, which is render. This is the most important function. That's every component must have render, and it must return something. Every component has to have a sort of visual representation. But there are other methods you can define. Let me close these. There's a lifecycle method. Like if anyone's used iOS or Android, so every time your app starts or something happens, like the OS will call your app. That also exists for React. The one that you'll use most of the time in React is something called component did. Thank you. Sorry. Every time I always think that the autocomplete is wrong. It's always me that's wrong. Component did. So you can see, like, if you just type component, you'll see there's also other things that you'll see. I think 90% of the time you'll be using this one. This is where you want to put your general API calls. So this is called once per initialization of the component. I could do breakpoints and prove it to you. But take my word for it for now. And here we'll load results from our API. Now, the way you generally do that is something called fetch. So fetch is equivalent of get.json in jQuery if you use that, or just it's a way to make an AJAX call somewhere else. Quick trivia is that it's natively implemented by many browsers, but not all. But one nice thing that Create React does for you is it adds what's called a polyfill. So if that person happens to be using like Internet Explorer 9 or something, it'll still work just fine using other methods, using the old school XML HTTP request for you. So we'll do fetch. So fetch takes 2 arguments. It'll take an address and like what to do next, a callback. Another nice thing that Create React App does for you is it gives you some shims. So on other newer language features that may also not be natively supported by some browsers. And one in particular is called await. So in our examples in class, I'll use await when possible because I think it's a little bit clearer to program, especially for people who are less familiar with asynchronous programming. There are some gotchas, but most of the time you're okay. So we'll do this. We'll say const results equals await. Fetch. This is the URL address. I have the URL copy and pasted here. Oops. I can't type. There. So this makes it seem like you're programming synchronously. So I don't have to do a callback, I just keep going. And this line will not execute until this previous line is done. The computer can go on and do other things. Like the programming language will go handle other things. It's not like your whole program locks up and waits for this to happen. This is very magical, if you ask me. And this is a new ES7 feature, I think. I don't think it's in ES6. But to use that, every time you use await in a function, you have to let JavaScript know that this is an asynchronous function. So you just wrap it in this thing called async. And let's see. There's 2 pieces here. After you fetch it, you have to process the JSON, and that's also an await call. So let's just make sure that's working. Instead of breakpoint, not there. Why won't it let me? Okay, good. Do that way. I have a bug somewhere. Movies not fine. Oh, I deleted movies. Oops. Sorry, let me put this back in real quick. What do I call it? Test movies? Test data. Oh. Sorry. Okay, so it says, hey, I have data now. Where did my breakpoint go? Okay, so if we look at data here, we're able to see that's this now. Why don't I see data here?
I think .json returns another promise. Check that out.
Right down here. Might be because my app's crashing. Hold on. Let's find this out now.
Take a look at the .json function, its signature. Yeah, pretty sure.
I get G set this on.
So you have to await it.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry. Oh, yeah. Okay. I still don't see it, but
Oh, interesting. It is printing the promise.
here it is. Okay. So I printed it out here. I have data now. Why did it happen twice? It's weird. Okay. Let's do for another day. Okay, so it does print out here that we have our data here. So now I just do before. So let's get rid of this test data from before. So I'm going to set it to the state of movies. You'll see why I do this later, but I started this as a class variable because I might want the original API results again later. So I might be filtering and changing things. So I want the original API results here. And I'll set that to movies. And here I will do and every time you use state, then you have to define a constructor. First line is always the same, and then the second line is initializing the state object. And initialize it to 0, to empty array. Yeah.
What's the line number 10?
Yeah, you always have to call this. This is just programming. It just
It's gonna override the constructor.
no, it's not. It's calling the super. So super here means the super class. It's the parent class of this object. Every time we make a component, we'll see it extends React.component. So this is code from React, and it has this is all in TypeScript, but it has constructor and it does some things here. So you need to call the super component, super function. It sets everything up.
It's implicated in Ruby as well.
Yeah, there's not really equivalent in Ruby, I'd say. I mean, you can sometimes call super in Ruby, but not always. But it's always this line. So, yes, thanks. Good question. Okay, so it looks like it's working just fine. Yeah, I didn't call. See, actually, you'll see one thing here. This is causing me some errors. Let me fix this here. You'll get an error about each child iterator should have unique key prop. This is a warning. This is just a thing about React. If you have multiple components, it wants to keep them separate, or like kind of the system needs to know which one's which. So it's nice if I had done here. Should pass the key. If there's anything unique, read ID in our case will work just fine. This error will then go away. Cool. Okay, so this is working. Looks like it's working. I'm actually not sure this is working because it looks the same as before. And one of the requirements for the application is I want a loading state. This is a very common feature in most apps today. You see a little spinner or something, telling people something is loading. So how do I do that? Okay, there's a few different ways to do that. But first, I'll add, just for testing, I'll add a new function called sleep. So don't worry too much about this. This is just a way to make the computer wait for a second. So here, we'll pretend that this takes a long time. Say 5,000. So now if we go here, we should see something. Oh, let's wait this dot sleep. So nothing. Go. So now I'm convinced that's actually doing something. And here I'd like to introduce another concept. So far we've only been using state for information about like our data, what movies, what tweets, but we can also store various things of state about what state our UI is in. So in this case, let's say loading. It's loading. We initialize to false, or I guess wherever you want, or we can start with true. Start true or false here.
True.
Okay, so when we first load our page, we'll be loading, and then after we finish loading these results, we'll say is loading false. And now there's a few different ways we can go about implementing this. So the one that I used in the pre-work for the liked, it was using the ternary operator, this question mark. So we can use that here too. We can say this.state.is loading. If we are loading, let's return I am still loading. Or we can return this movie list. So I want everyone to understand this line. So if the state is loading, we'll return a loading text, or else we'll return the movie list. So for loading, we won't return the movie list. That makes sense, is because we don't have we don't have any movies yet, so we may as well not show the movie list. And hopefully you're also starting to catch on that when things in the this.state variable change, like everything, that's how you force updates in the UI. You change things in the state, and things just magically update themselves as they should. So we do this.
So,
yes?
question about state. Does the app have one state and then multiple components listed, or do you have multiple states?
That's a good question. For now, we'll say every component has its own state.
Okay. So the one you defined up there is the component
Just for this component,
for app.
for app.
Okay. And then so
Movie list, for
has its
example,
own state.
it would have its own state. And movie list, for the most part, will not know about app state.
Should only use its own state.
And one per
component.
And I think this is what Charles kind of wants to gloss over here, is that you can pass your state to someone else as a problem.
Can do that. Or in week 3 or 4, we'll talk about how we can share state between components. So as we do this, you'll see that it becomes a little bit difficult or annoying if you have if you have like 50 components and they all need to share some common state. For example, you can imagine like a logged in, if the user is logged in, like everyone wants to know about that, and passing it 50 times could be kind of annoying. Having one place where people can go and hear about it does make sense. That's a little bit more of a complicated architecture. Okay, so if this is, so let's reload. So it says I am still loading. I don't know why it's not doing H1, but, and then boom. So you can imagine instead of I am loading, you'd have a spinning cool thing, or a little animated GIF of an animal running or something. But there are a couple different ways to do this. I think this is a little bit ugly. So we can do this. I would say my preferred way is to do something like this. So inside here, we're in JSX line inside here because we're in this return, we're inside code, we're inside these angle brackets. But here, up here, we're just in regular JavaScript, so we can use equals. This is it looks a little bit strange because we're assigning these like tags to variables, but it works. And here, instead of all this, I'm going to say movies undefined. Oh, sorry, movies is where's movies? Oh,
That's the.
So that also works the same way. That's called conditional rendering. And you'll use it very often for if the user's logged in, then show a login button. If not, or sorry, show a logout button. If they are logged in, show a logout button. That kind of thing is very common use case for this coding pattern.
I think a little bit of bigger picture stuff here is that you can just assign HTML code to any variable. You can use it just like any other code.
Yeah, man. Content is a variable that holds this output. I think that's pretty cool. Okay. So if you guys can hang on for maybe one more thing, I wanted to do one more requirement, which is how we can show more than just 20 movies. So on web and things, it's very common to do an infinite scroll. When you scroll down, you'll see just keep loading more. There are libraries to help you with that on React, which you can use. But if we program ourselves, since I don't want to go through all the watching the scroll position and stuff, I'll just add a button to the bottom that you can press to try and see more movies. So we have movie list. I think it's list. So we'll add a button. What did I like? Oh, it's not style. Sorry,
I think it's
just info. Is it type or something? Oh, let me turn off the sleep. It's annoying. Okay. So at the bottom, we now have a button saying load more. Doesn't do anything. So now we have some serious plumbing to do. I actually don't know if I'll get through this. And we have about 15 minutes left, but I'm trying my best.
We're gonna figure it out.
You figure it out?
Yeah.
Push me through it, Jaren?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me change the color of this button first, actually. No, that's not
What color do you want?
right. I don't know, like not C color.
Primary.
Primary, that's what I want. Yes. I think it's something else. I want this one. No, I want this one. Hey, why can't I touch? There we go. Maybe it's not worth. It's too
rabbit
rabbit.
holing a little bit.
I've gone too far.
One second.
What did it say? Can't see. Is color. Okay, sorry. Thank you for indulging me. Yeah, that's weird. So now, when this button is pressed, we want something to happen. Now, this guy is not in charge of knowing what movies there are. Actually, the parent app component is. So this is an example of when we'd have to call on a parent's property. We'd have to pass in the function of, say, go load more movies to the parent. So here, it's a new node. We'll also do handle click. Say. There's a couple different ways to do this, but I would say
Does everybody understand that syntax, by the way? The movies and handle click. Basically pulling those, this dot process an object and pulling those things out of that JavaScript object.
and I'm passing it, and when we click, it's going to call, it's a function that calls handle click.
Wait, so movies and handle click are not parameters?
They are parameters under props. So props is an object that has a property movies and a property is handle click. Right, exactly. Yeah. This is just some beautiful sugar that helps you.
Same.
But if I have two handle click, for example, if I have two button.
Okay, so we can say handle load more click. That's a good question. We should probably make that. Okay, and so now we have to pass it something. Oh wait, actually, sorry, this is not. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You actually don't have to do the E. You can just
Yeah.
have the E.
We don't use the E. And then that AppJSS, now we want to pass in something called handle click. Long, what do we call it? Sorry, handle long click. It's not like load more. Something like that. And then here, we go load more. For now, let's just do make sure that everything's working fine. Everything's not working fine. Okay,
This is a warning
this is
though.
old. This is old too, I think. Okay, so load more. I'll load more. Great, so now the parent is in charge of making a new list of movies, and it will pass this new list to his child. The child will just re-render itself with the new movie data. So how do we get more movies here?
Let's take a look at that API call.
Why did we put the button in the other element, not in the main?
The button action.
I guess the button could go under parent. This is a good question when you program is where components belong. I guess we could put the button in the parent, then we won't have to pass this thing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It actually just felt like it should
But
be on the
just
list.
for the sake of argument,
Sure.
yeah. There's a bit of flexibility with this, but it's really important just to like make sure you keep track of it in your own head. And It's like something that makes sense.
I was just wondering if it was required.
No,
Yeah,
actually,
yeah.
it makes sense to put it outside. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, I think so.
Good
Because
call.
so that the movie list is only responsible for rendering a listing.
Yes. So this is as you get more and more experience, you'll make more of these kind of decisions, like where should components live, how should I pass information from one component to the other component, and Oscar questioned my assumptions quite well. Okay, so load more is. Oh, sorry, I was going to go to the. Where was the? Why did everything? Did I restart my computer or something? What? Wait, hold on. Why do I have the? Okay, whatever. It's like somewhere right here. Yeah. Okay. So this is a documentation of the movie database. And we'll say general features.
What movie list are you getting right now?
Good question. What was I getting? Now playing. So I can't see the screen over there. So, okay.
Now playing movies.
It's not like
to the tab movies.
Which one?
The movie with the movie tabs
To
on top.
the movie tab.
Lockdown.
here we go. Sorry, I just had to find it. I'm falling down a hole. No, this is for one movie. Sorry, one second.
Want
So
to
this,
know more? You want to learn movie?
what do I want?
You want to learn movies?
Yes.
There's a animator named H.
Yeah, I wanted to look at the. I wanted to see the details, but yes, okay, fine. What was it? Yeah. I think movies slash now playing. Hold on, one second. Let me just. Because you have to do this in the homework. It's.
But not playing.
Aha. Oh, so close. So this is the API endpoint that gives you now playing. Because actually, what we'll also have to do here is you might later on the homework there might be a requirement asking you to search movies. And you have to use a different endpoint. Okay. So we want page here. Like so, I didn't hear you said that. But yes, page. We just want the next page.
So you need to set up a counter.
Yes. So we could do this a couple different ways. What's the best way to do it?
I think we should just put it in state.
Cool. So page 0, 1. Sorry, 1. Yeah. And then here, let's factor this out into. That. How do we do this?
Yeah, that's what
Actually, we need to fix this.
Just go to plus.
Or actually, so another kind of cool JavaScript feature you can use is template strings like this. So if you use a backtick instead of quotes, you can then add templates. We'll do oops, and page.
That was, yeah, it should be an and both of those.
Oh, is there already a? Oh, there's already a thing. Sorry. No, this should be $sign here. Yeah. I can't see if that's right. Yay. Okay. Let's pass the page here.
And you have to do this get moved
It sounds like this is all actually a method called like fetch movies. So sorry, I may actually let me see this here. So this fetch movies just returns you the latest movies. And then here we can say okay, let's see if that works.
Does this still need to be async?
I think so. Because I want to wait for it, don't I?
Oh yeah, there's another one.
Okay, I think we're still in business. Now, a bit more. So yeah, I don't like what we did here, but that's okay. You can keep this in this or this state. This one's not important.
Load.
Interesting. And load movies. Let's actually change this. I don't want to do two calls here. Sorry. I didn't do this. This part I'm kind of winging it, so. Let's go to the file page. File page.
Here's the thing though, when you press load more, you're going to replace everything. Oh, sorry, never mind. Good call.
So also one quick note is this is the same thing as doing here. It's just cooler. Saves you 5 strokes if you just do that. In the pre-work you did this as well. Yes. Okay. Thank you. You're as good as a computer. It kind of worked. Okay, so now we have good.
I think you're concatenating a promise with it. You have to wait.
Thank you. Boom, we got more movies. There's other things you can do here. So you can also, the other thing, the last thing I want to show is this also is loading property. You would toggle this. Now it really makes sense to have this button outside, but if you set that property, this button does this. So while it's loading, you'd want to set is load equals true, and then it would show, do other cool things like that. Okay, so any questions? That's about all I had for the walkthrough today. This should get you through a lot of the homework. I clearly didn't do a lot of the styling, so you're going to have to make it look a little bit nicer than this for your homework. But the principles should be mostly covered. Cool. Okay, if there's that's all for today. If there's any questions, please come ask. If you have a question.
Will you explain real quick about this keyword?
That's a very good question. So I foresaw this in the learning portal. I added a link about this keyword. I might have it. There's 4 ways. This one is good. So this link is on the main page in the learning.coderschool.vn. This in JavaScript refers to the current object you're operating on, kind of, or the current context. So if I call a function, if I say, hey, call this function later, that function may have a different this than when the person who scheduled that function to be run. So it can be a little bit confusing. And the annoying thing is that 95% of the time, you want behavior that is not the default behavior. So this document goes over a few ways you can fix this. In the pre-work, I asked you to do bind. So you do bind this. That means that no matter what happens, the this, whenever that function is run, is the this of the object or the component that you've declared it in. It's almost always the case. That's actually 100% of the time that's what you want. 99% of the time. Another thing I did here in today's video is I actually did this one. So in this little fat arrow, the equals greater than sign, that also does the same thing as bind. So
if you use the syntax, you will have to
do bind. Yeah, you can do this or bind. At least 1 or 2 people did this in their pre-work as well. So this is, sorry, the word this is, it's hard to avoid using the word this when talking about this. But in the constructor, you can use this syntax to make sure it's always bound correctly. The most performant way is to do it this way, but it doesn't really matter unless you're Facebook.
One cool thing about this way is when you look at the common constructor, you know this common.
It's true.
Yeah, what this common going to do.
Yeah, this could be more readable.
Maybe common can get a lot of handle changes or something like
So this way easier for the other developers to understand when they
that. Yeah.
But it makes your code longer, so that makes it
Yeah,
hard to
so-
understand. So it's always a trade-off.
Like C++ way.
Okay, so those of you who don't have access to a learning portal, who aren't in our system, please, I'll come find you, and it'll just take me 2 minutes to get you into the system. But other than that, we'll see you here on Thursday. Sorry it's so crowded, but on Thursday we'll be doing a Instagram exercise. So you'll build something very similar to Instagram.com, which is built on React. Actually, the engineer at Instagram is the one who originally invented React to build their web application. And we'll be doing that on Thursday. Cool. Thank you, everyone.